Hello and welcome to Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast.
Today, our very special guest is none other than John Berger, and John Berger is the Chief Executive Officer of Otovo USA, and also, previously, he was the founder and CEO of Sunova, which is a very famous company that I have actually even worked for before. One time I was teaching a PV technical sales course over in Houston, and I guess that was for John, but it was such a big company. So welcome to the show, John.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
Yeah, so what's been happening lately in this solar coaster for you?
Yeah, so obviously we can get into the Sunova and the industry here if we want to, but moving ahead, we identified, if you were to look at Sunova, some of the other competitors, just Sunova, there's three businesses there. There's financing, loan and lease, obviously going to lease for the most part after the end of the tax credit for 25D. And then new construction, which is industry has really been 100% focused on, is how do you get new customers in with new installations. And then the third was service, and that is rolling trucks and fixing systems and also selling the power back into the wholesale market under what we call a virtual power plant. There's a lot of names for it, but virtual power plant, VPP, I'm sure you know that acronym. And
VPP, yep.
Yep. And so what we're doing with the Tovo is we're just going to focus on that third business, that service business. And so we're rolling trucks and fixing systems, solar, batteries, EV chargers, generators, load managers, anything that handles power, manages power, generates power on the home. And then eventually we'll get into the business as well, fixing systems there. But we're started in Texas, and now we're all over Texas, and we'll be growing pretty rapidly out from there. We do, in addition for our customers of fixing their systems where we can, which is at least half of Texas, we do sell the most compelling, cheapest power from the grid to a solar system customer, to a generator customer, and then take their power and monetize that in the wholesale market. So we have a bundled transaction, if you will, on the retail side with the VPP. So we do offer that to our service customers as well. That's pretty, compelling value.
I imagine it's kind of tricky setting up a VPP, and there's different rules in every different location. In Texas, isn't it sort of like a country in itself? I think some people still want it to be, but there's just lots of different rules and regulations or absence of rules and regulations. So setting up a VPP and buying electricity and selling it, how does that work?
Well, we do have a partner that we've been partnered with to essentially provide both the retail power and purchase the VPP. And we'll be, as we move towards, and our long-term focus is not only the United States, but Europe. And all of Europe is deregulated, open consumer choice. So what does that mean? Well, you get to sell the retail power and the VPP everywhere in Europe too, in the Texas. So I do think that we're long overdue for updating of regulations, given new technology like solar and EVs and load management and so forth. And I do think that it would be very beneficial for consumers, given these skyrocketing power bills, that they would be allowed to buy power from a competitive provider, even in places like Florida, for instance, where there's no choice. You still have to buy a monopoly. So we're focused on how do you get into those markets that are more consumer friendly first, and then we can move into these markets that are fully regulated with just our service offering. And we may need more power trading companies as partners as we move into these additional markets like Europe.
So how do you plan on bringing a power line to Europe? Would it be like underground, undersea, some combination of that?
No, I don't think I'm going to attempt that. I think we'll be very acquisitive. We'll be a lot more acquisitive than we were at Sunova, and buying companies and bringing on folks that have built out companies under our independent service provider program, and hire technicians directly too, like we did at Sunova. I mean, Sunova is a really big service operation, over 400,000 customers, over 500 trucks, and folks rolling around can go on to Puerto Rico. And so we're aiming to build that operation out again and then some in a much faster time period. So we'll be acquisitive, and I can imagine that there would be a big acquisition or a series of acquisitions to get into Europe.
Yeah, I remember one time listening to a presentation by Dr. Shi, who was the founder of the original SunTech, and now he has a company called Bela Solar. They're manufacturing solar in the United States right now. But he did a presentation one time about having a power line that went from Argentina all the way up, probably got to be through Texas, and then across the Bering Straits and all the way through Eurasia back down to Africa and to the tip of South Africa. So there's your connection. You can actually make that power line, even though I was joking about a power line from Texas to Europe. I just figured it out. It could be happening. Somebody already figured it out. And it's a good way of, like spreading that solar energy without needing energy storage if you make bigger power lines. And there's always all these borders and not my backyard stuff. So that would be a good way of overcoming it. But it also sounds like your business plan too with Otovo is pretty good for being resilient with things like the tax credits, fading out if they don't renew the tax credits. So you have the maintenance and all that kind of stuff. So like their stuff that's already installed, it's going to be even more important to keep that stuff tuned up. Virtual power plants, that's, sharing electrons, and then even being more diversified over there in Europe and, different countries like that. So it sounds like a pretty good business plan. And how's it going right now? Like, I know you're in Texas. Are you doing anything in Europe? I know that Europe is where they pretty much invented the virtual power plant. I remember trying to think if I could remember the name of this company, and Shell bought them, Next Kraftwerk. I think they were like the early virtual power plant company in Germany, where they have a whole bunch of, solar installed there. They used to have half the solar in the world. And just because of their progressive policies, we had Hans Josef Thel on the podcast. He was the guy that pretty much invented the feed-in tariff along with Hermann Scher, another German politician. But that is interesting, planning on going and taking the virtual power plant back to Europe. So how does that happen?
Well, I think it gets back into is that you can now do VPP globally, right? You can do them in Australia, you can do them in Japan, the UK, like I said, all of Europe, and then parts of the US. And then in some of the regulated territories like Puerto Rico with Sunova, we had one with the Department of Energy. I don't know what the status is of that, of course, at this point, given all the political changes that we've had over the past year. But there are various different programs, but the best program is to let consumers choose and to have the market provide these competitive programs like what Otovo is offering, and then let the consumers choose the best one for them. And so that's what we're aiming to provide is the best program, the best service that is the quickest, right? When you look at the problem across Europe and the US, it isn't necessarily providing a VPP or not to consumers. It's just simply fixing their system on a timely basis. And generators have the same issue. There is a world of difference between the two businesses of new installation and service. Those are not the same business. Period, full stop. Let me repeat that. Not the same business. And we keep talking like they are in some cases, but we privately know that they're not. And so we're not in the business of doing new installations. We'll do some install, re-upsells and installs and so forth, but we're not going to be doing new generator, new solar, and all that other stuff. We're not doing that. We're going to have some partners, we already do, that we'll send those customers to. And it's just focusing on how do I get to that customer as fast as possible to solve their problem, right? That's a big problem in this market. We have millions of customers in both Europe and the US, and they're called orphans. They don't have anybody to go even call, let alone are you getting the best price. And that's got to stop. We've got to have the ability to be like a utility that when something goes wrong, you're monitoring. You're actually really monitoring. You're not just taking the money to monitor it and then the customer still has to call you. Oh yeah, I never looked at it. That happens all the time. You're monitoring it. You're finding there's a problem. You're rolling a truck within 48 hours or 24 or 12 hours, depending on the service levels with us, and you're getting that fixed. That's a really big operational lift with supply chain and how do you get the right piece of equipment on the right truck at the right customer at the right time? So there's a lot to it. It's a big scale game, but it's something that we've done before in the past with Sunova, and we'll do it again here. We'll do it much better because this is all going to be our focus versus, like I talked about with Sunova, 3 different businesses. So we're pretty excited about driving that service home. And then on top of that, we can get more competitive grid power, both the retail and the VPP, the consumers on top of that.
I imagine that there could be some relationship between service and a virtual power plant because you have these older, solar systems out there, and they might not have like the connection that you need. Like you might have an old PV system from 20 years ago that won't be able to communicate or get a signal when to import, export, or you might need to add a battery to it or some newer technology or hook things up to the internet to be able to say buy or sell or, import and export and all that kind of stuff. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, we operate with a lot of different OEMs, both in Europe and the US. And, in Europe, you've got prevalence of Chinese companies, right, that you don't have in the US. Huawei comes to mind, for instance. So there are some differences because of policy, because of politics. But at the same time, everybody has got, everybody views that their widget, their ESS is the best one out there, right, in the market. The reality is there's a lot of good solutions out there. And what we're here to do is no matter who made it, we're here to fix it and work with those OEMs to take care of the customers. Because again, this is a big problem. When you look at a lot of the unhappiness with residential solar, again, whether it's the US or Europe, a lot of it comes down to the lack of service. This thought that, again, you're the initial installer and somehow you're supposed to do the service too. Again, those are 2 different businesses. Those are very different businesses. You want to intentionally vertically integrate. There's some companies out there that are even making their own ESS, right? You can do that. It's just, you try to do a lot. You're trying to do a whole lot without any partnerships, without any help, without any friends. And I think you ought to just say, hey, we're just going to focus on one thing. And right now, there's no question that service is the biggest pain point in the market. It's creating the biggest problem, the biggest market perception issue, the biggest political perception issue for us in the US, but also in the EU. And Otovo's here to solve that problem for consumers.
So you're doing service, and I guess you're doing service on projects that were already built before Otovo came into existence, because looks like your company's just 4 months old. Is that?
Yeah, at most. But, it's pretty impressive at this point in time. I think it's, business is about timing. You can learn that the hard way and the easy way, right? I've learned both. But, I would say this, that if you look at the EU and the United States, you got about 33 million homes alone. So not just forget about the business market for a minute, but homes that either have a solar system, a battery, or generator on them. So if you're looking at, our goal is 250,000 by the end of 2028. Well, that seems pretty doable, really doable, right? So there's a lot out there, and I want the industry to grow, the residential solar industry to grow as fast as possible. I think we all do. But at the end of the day, our company doesn't really depend on whether it's growing next year or not. There's a huge debate going on what's going to happen post the 25D, the investment tax credit expiry at the end of the year. We're not involved in that debate in terms of whether it matters to our business or not.
Yeah, then once the end of the year happens, people just have to finance things a little bit differently for a while. But so with the service, it looks like you just mentioned too residential. So is that your main focus is residential customers?
Yes.
And then so what's important with that is having lots of good technicians. So when you get the technicians, what are different things that you look for? Like, would that be NABCEP certifications and things like that?
Yeah, these certifications, licenses, on the path to getting a license in a particular state and area. We're looking for people that are people-minded. They can go in, talk to our customers, and make them feel good and solve problems. They got to love to be problem solvers, and that's a big reason why service is materially different than initial install. So that's something that we're looking for. And yeah, we have an independent service provider program where you're bringing your trucks and a couple of your boats, you get a certain area, And we provide everything else. So we provide the branding, we provide customer flow, we provide the technology built by AI. We use AI in the field. So we're providing a lot, just like a FedEx or an Amazon, but you're running your own business. So that's something we're doing as well. I think it's pretty exciting for the person making it happen in the field.
Are you hiring right now then? Are you looking for technicians?
We are. Our growth is pretty substantial, and we are hiring in Texas. And again, we're looking for acquisitions across the country and the EU.
Yeah, well, if you go on the NABCEP website, you can look for different people with NABCEP certifications. And so you go down there and you click on PV CMS, that's the NABCEP PV Commissioning and Maintenance Specialist certification. And you go down there and you can find a whole bunch of people that took my exam prep class. And that would be a good place to start with the PV CMS, or a lot of other PV certifications would be very helpful too, like the PV Installation Professional, or the newer one is the Energy Storage Installation Professional, the ESIP, or some people call it the ESIP. So that would be some great places to go to look for people. And then for people listening, take my class and get yourself hired by John Berger himself. That would be a great idea. A lot of things too that I'm hearing about in the industry is we need to look at it more like storage and solar versus solar and storage. Like storage is really taking a front seat. And especially that goes with virtual power plants, because you can take your electricity and put it in the car, the electric vehicle, which is pretty much energy storage on wheels, or you could put the energy storage in one of those boxes that you put on your wall or somewhere on your house or the outside of your house. And it's really important to find people that know how to work with these products. And there's all these different brands, and all the different brands will have different ways that they communicate with the internet. And I imagine, when you're doing virtual power plants, there's a whole lot that has to be done. There's the policy, like Public Utilities Commissions, or maybe they even call it the Railroad Commission over there when you're in Texas. I'm not sure, but I know that a lot of things go under the auspices of the Railroad Commission. And then you have the internet where everything has to go, and the utilities that need the electricity and that will send out signals. And then you'll have to figure out when to send electricity this way and that way. So you got a lot of work cut out for you there.
That's a good point, and it's a good site. We'll take you up in your suggestion.
Okay, great. Okay, yep. So you hear that, everybody? You got to go get those NABCEP certifications. John Berger is hiring.
We interrupt you for a very important announcement. Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast has been brought to you by Sean White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. That's right, Sean White is sponsoring his own podcast, and he wants to remind you to go check out some of his classes. You can go to SolarSEAN, that's solar, SEAN.com, and then click on the links to check out his classes. You can check out his heat spring classes, and you can also hire him to teach classes for you, like at your company, something like that. Now back to the show.
You said mostly you're looking at Texas right now, and where are you finding your customers? So you need people that need maintenance on their residential PV systems.
Yes, and we do generators as well. I would say we're finding them all over the state. I mean, it's pretty prevalent. Obviously, we're focused in the major metropolitan areas, Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, and Houston. But, there are many other areas. Texas has been on fire in terms of growth.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of spreading out of those major cities in places like, College Station, Bryan College Station. And then you've got the Metroplex. Dallas-Fort Worth has become monstrous, right, just by its own right. And you've got a place like El Paso. So it's really been all over, and I think we'll quickly move out from there, given what kind of demand we're seeing for the quality of service that we provide.
You mentioned also generators. So are generators ever part of a virtual power plant?
Well, you can do them. Certainly they are in the big industrial data center, and they often fire back into the grid, or you support whatever that facility is, and then you sell back the grid power in certain times where power rates are high. I would say that the commercial side is interesting as well. There's been some cases, grocery store chains and so forth, that have done this. And I think it can happen on the residential side as well. But yet there's a lot more rules and restrictions. The battery's a lot more valuable than a generator from a wholesale power standpoint, for sure.
Okay. So that's kind of interesting too, to have a generator that backfeeds the grid. So I guess you would probably have a generator that connects to an inverter, which a lot of generators do these days. And then you could send that power from the generator back to the grid, just like you could from an energy storage system. And maybe it would even be like a natural gas generator. So the gas is just already coming at you.
Yeah, that's right. And you could have different configurations. Like, again, that generator could be power in the home, and then you take the power that was coming off the grid to the home and you sell it back in. So something like that. Generators can charge batteries up. There's a lot of things to do, with them. And now what I would say is that I think over time, we would expect that batteries become more cheaper and cheaper, more dense. The energy density goes up and become more prevalent than the generator side of things. And the people that have generators are more likely to buy solar and storage over a period of time, because they certainly have shown that they have an interest in having reliable power. And we know that solar plus batteries deliver very reliable power.
I know that people say that you can see North Dakota from outer space. There's no people there, or just a couple. No, there are some people there, of course. And they're doing a lot of oil wells, and they're flaring off this waste gas rather than just blowing methane into the atmosphere, because the methane, which is essentially natural gas, is a worse greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So it's better to just burn it. It always seems so wasteful to me to just burn it for nothing. Like, you might as well make electricity out of it if you're just going to burn it off. Or maybe better yet, just leave all that stuff in the ground, but they're not going to do that. So that might be a good thing to do, is to take that methane and use it rather than not use it. And so they could send it back to the grid, charge batteries, and put it in one of your virtual power plants.
That's right. And I think really as an industry, I think we need to start looking at ourselves. And I've long had this view that we're in the electron and delivering electrons industry, or delivering power industry. And it's not to the grid, as some people would say. It's to the consumer, right? Whether the consumer gets the power from a utility system, because there's not one grid, or it gets it from on-site generation, the consumer doesn't really mind either way. They just want the power to be there. And I think that's where we got to start looking at our business, because it starts to get really a mouthful when you start talking about, like, what do you do? Well, it's not just solar anymore, to your point. It's solar and batteries. Oh, what about EV chargers? Yeah, we do that too. What about load managers and managing loads? Like, air conditioner is really important. Yeah, we do that too. So now you've got this big, long sentence. And, what is it that you're doing? You're managing the power supply. That's what you're doing. You're optimizing the bill. You're optimizing the reliability for the consumer. And I think that's what we all need to start thinking about. And the technologies that we're talking about, solar and batteries, well, they're distributed technologies inherently, right? We know that from looking at where batteries really dominate our lives in the consumer electronics, right? Like our smartphones and then laptops, iPads. And so what we're doing here is we're saying we are going to provide those solutions, that power from those technologies, to consumers directly, and make sure that they're, in good shape. They're producing the power the consumers expect at the pricing or value that the consumers expect.
Have you spent a lot of time in Europe seeing what they're doing there? I know that they say that they're a lot more forward than we are, just because they started the solar industry with their feed-in tariff.
I think Europe has its own challenges as well. So nobody's perfect, just like humans. And that would make sense. I think there is still some challenges over there as well, but they are different. I mean, our regulatory system is a mess. It is an absolute mess, whether it's lack of permitting, reform, and understanding and consensus. We basically regulate for the most part by the states instead of the federal government. And this leads to a gigantic problem that when you look at it, on top of that, we have at best socialism running this industry. And somehow, a nation that prides itself on capitalism and individualism is okay with its power industry, for God's sakes, being something that's socialistic, I dare say even worse than that in many cases.
Yeah, the AHJ is a big commie. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I was going to say in co-ops, I mean, what's that? You look at our system, it's really incredulous that we're behind everybody. We're even behind the French. I mean, I hate to say it, that's the truth. And so we're looking at how do we catch up to the Europeans? How do we catch up to the Japanese? How do we catch up to the Australians? And when you look at Otovo's business model, you'd look at Australia and go, gee, that looks familiar. And you'd be right. That's where it came from.
Yeah, a lot of times, like getting permits, just it depends on the HJ. Some are great. And that's the authority having jurisdiction. That's usually your city or your county. And getting a permit does seem a little bit like getting work done behind the Iron Curtain. For people that don't know what that means, that was like, back when there was the Cold War, that was the communist side over there with, Russia and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, I had a guy yesterday in the building department, it was a friend of mine, call me up, and it was just like the crazy stuff that they were making him go through that wasn't benefiting anyone, that was costing him his valuable time and people that he's hiring valuable time. And, it could be done a lot better,
Yeah.
and you see that the price of a residential solar system, just to take something, is way more expensive in the United States than just about anywhere in the world. And a lot of it has to do with this Iron Curtain mentality.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You don't have to go any further than look at the price difference on a solar panel between Europe and the US. It's crazy.
And what would you say that is?
Oh, I'd say that
You're doing good. If you can get 30-cent panels in the US right, it's probably more like mid to high 30s at this point.
and you can get all you want in Europe at 8.5 cents.
Yeah. And then even beyond just the solar modules, there's, just the bureaucracy. It's kind of a nightmare. That's why in some ways, I wonder if getting rid of the tax credit will get rid of so much bureaucracy that maybe it will help in some weird way. Trying to be an optimist.
Yeah, I am a proponent, been a long time proponent. You can go back and look at some of the things back in 2016 and so forth that wrote letters to Congress saying just that point. But I'm also a proponent of giving consumers choices and breaking the monopolies up. Basically, do what we did in Houston and Dallas everywhere. And that's the way Europe is run. That's the way Japan's run. That's the way Australia's run. So this is not, something that, hey, well, let's go try this, be the first in the world. Like, we're the last in the world to do this. And I think a trade-off here is appropriate. Let's update the regulations, just get rid of the tax credit. It adds too much complexity, causes too many problems. And let's the market work. Let's let the consumers work and choose. I don't know why that's so difficult. I mean, politically, I understand it because, change is hard, right? Look at AI adoption, change is hard, but it's inevitable. These power bills are going vertical. Literally, it's not hyperbole, right? Look at a chart. It's not going to stop anytime soon. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It is going to continue to rocket higher. And where's the relief valve? There is none, except let's make this market work and function and allow people to put on their homes solar and storage, for instance, and load managers and so forth, to be able to manage and deliver their own power at a more compelling price, at a more compelling reliability even. To me, this has been very straightforward. Allow the market to work, allow the consumer to choose.
So in order to get solar modules down to 8 cents a watt in the United States, what would you do if you were in charge? I think I'm going to start your presidential campaign right now.
Well, I understand that there's this grudge match going on between the United States and China. I think it could be managed a little better, in my view. But at the same time, I think we got to be really careful that we haven't put ourselves in this island that we think, yeah, we're the biggest economy in the world by far. That's a fact. But it's a big world too. And let's not let our egos get in the way of free trade and having, what we've done is gone from maybe you could say one extreme and saying, we're going to have our own free trade rules regardless of what our trade partners do. And now we've gone in and put ourselves and put a wall, in many cases, literally around us. And history says, regardless of country or empire, that has never worked, not one time, and it won't work here. So I think we need to be very, very careful that we look at if we're going to bring these equipment manufacturing, whether it's solar panel, whether it's a battery, whether it's an inverter, back here to the U.S., are we doing this in a way that's sustainable economically over the long term? And I'm concerned that we're not.
The reason that Rome fell, is that from the tariffs on the PV modules?
Yeah, I'm not sure that that was the cause of Rome, but fall and get into that debate. But if you do recall that the British Empire tried to put a wall around itself and its colonies, and that ultimately failed, including there was a nice upstart country that was to be the United States of America that memorized power loom plans that were made only in Britain in the guy's head and brought it back to the U.S. and it spread from there and created the textile industry in the North United States, right? Northeast United States. So history is replete with examples that you can try to put walls around people, but enterprising young people and in countries have a way of getting around those walls. And I don't think it'll be any different here.
Yeah, and then didn't they steal silkworms from China and brought them back to Europe?
That's right.
You don't need a Silk Road anymore,
Yeah, and history is replete with those examples. And so I think we need to be very thoughtful about what we do. And I would like to see a change in policy, embracing these new technologies. I think it's really very short-sighted and not a good idea at all to demonize energy sources. And in this case, right now, obviously solar and batteries and so forth are under attack. And I don't think that's a good idea long-term for this country. And I would embrace the new technologies, not fight them.
Yeah, so it's pretty much like we're paying, triple for the PV modules compared to the rest of the world?
I mean, actually, unfortunately, it looks to me like it's about 4 to 5 times.
4 to 5 times, and that's more than triple, right?
I went to AM, but still, yes, not for. All right, so look, I think that we need to really think hard about what we're doing and the long-term implications. I mean, clearly the market globally is oversupplied at this point in time with solar panels and batteries and so forth, and we're adding more supply at a much higher level, artificially price level, and that's never worked. And I think we need to just be very cautious about it. And I understand that, again, the geopolitical tensions between the United States and China, and understand that. And obviously the solar and battery industry is not the only industry that's under this kind of stress by far. But we just need to be very cognizant that at the end of the day, history has taught us over and over again that you cannot create yourself into an artificial economic island.
What do you think about manufacturing in the United States? Is there hope for that?
I think that the job idea is not going to happen. I think that what we're going to have to do is fully automate. I think this gets into the AI technologies with more robotics. And I think we're going to find that these factories, regardless of what they're making, solar panels or stocks, are going to become very, very automated, very robotic. And so I think that what this current administration is really after, supposedly, is job creation. I think that we're going to fall way south of those kind of expectations because the cost structure is just too high, and it's colliding with AI to provide robotics that will do it for far cheaper.
Yep. And I know that everybody was worried about the computer taking away everybody's job. That was a big thing, I don't know, 30 years ago or something like that. And it created a whole lot more jobs.
Right.
So perhaps AI and automation will do the same thing. I mean, if you go back to the 90s, it just looked like common sense. It's going to get rid of all the jobs, but it's just created so many jobs. It's kind of funny that a lot of kids these days, what job do you want to have? Oh, I want to be an influencer. I have a daughter, that's her job, and she actually does pretty well. She's an influencer. So, that people are out there getting like hundreds of thousands of followers and things like that. And so some things also that seem to be moving along is there's different ways of dealing with moving electrons. There is the wires. There's a lot of people talking about hydrogen, and you can do electrolysis, and you split water molecules with electricity, and you can turn that into a gas that you can actually even mix with natural gas. That's the hydrogen. You could use a lot of the same infrastructure and things like that. But there's another way to move electrons around, and that's in the electric vehicle. And I think that there's so much promise for that. And we're going to have these, I've taken rides now in cars at the Waymo, through San Francisco where there is no human in the car besides me. I'm just sitting in the back seat. And by the way, everybody, if you do a Waymo, take the middle back seat. That way you get a better view, see what's going on in that Jaguar. But perhaps these cars will be able to go get charged. And if they don't have a passenger to pick up, they can move those electrons to the other side of town where they're needed instead of using wires or instead of using, gas in a pipeline. And I know that you mentioned that you're working with electric vehicles, those four-wheeled energy storage systems. I did go to Europe and to Barcelona, and I went to this place called Wallbox. And it's sort of like a tech company, and it's an energy storage company, and they're making these bidirectional EV chargers. And one of the things that they did at their headquarters is instead of upgrading the transformer and the lines going to their headquarters, they went and they put a bunch of bidirectional chargers, which they're developing, and a bunch of EVs there. They would work with them. They were Nissan Leafs, and then they could charge them during night time when nobody's in the office. They could charge them when the sun is up with the solar array. And that seems like something that's already happening, but it's part of the future and perhaps part of something that you're doing.
Yeah. And I would say, look,
I think that there is a more optimistic future with AI and embodied AI.
I think it'll lead to a life of more leisure. So I think we need to be thinking about this in a more optimistic scenario. You laid out a scenario where, frankly, taxi drivers and drivers are no longer needed, right? And so what do? I think we'll find other things for them to do. And I think that we'll find other hours in a week that they can do whatever they want to do. I'm much more on the optimistic side of where this goes. No delusions. I think there'll be some trying times about the disruption that this is going to cause given its rapid adoption, rapid evolution. But I think at the same time, we're going to end up in a much better life.
Yeah. So are you working with the bidirectional EVs, or what do you see as a future for that?
Well, I do agree with that. And the answer is we will get to that. Right now, what we have done is build almost our entire software stack ourselves using large language models. And we are then empowering, creating agents to do our scheduling, to do our dispatch, to do our customer service,
to do our inside sales, to assist our technicians in the field even.
I think, what we're doing is embracing the technology very clearly. And then can we get involved in robotics in some ways to assist our folks in the field? We think we can. And where else can we go with that? We've got some ideas, and some of that does involve bidirectional charging of vehicles and so forth. And how do you manage your energy at your house
to make it more sense for the energy you need when you need it in your life?
Yeah. And I suppose too, people could go to work, charge their car there, take some electricity home, discharge it there because people work when it's sunny, or maybe some days go the opposite direction. And there needs to be some kind of software, or we could say AI, that's going to coordinate all that and know when to charge something, when to discharge it, when the person might have a tendency to drive a little further one day. Maybe they like to go to the beach for their leisure time, all that kind of stuff. And how do you see people using AI in their jobs? Like, let's say there's a technician out there tuning up an old solar system. How would that work?
Well, I would say that right now it works where we're supporting that technician with information.
So instead of, being on the phone for hours with an OEM,
why can't the technician just ask the AI, the Tovo AI, what to do?
Yeah. Yeah, I've noticed too that there's a lot of people that get very frustrated when they're talking, on hold, trying to get a hold of an inverter manufacturer. And one of the things that I've told people when they ask me which inverter I should use, call their tech support and see how long it takes them to pick up the phone.
Yeah, we can change that. We are changing that.
So I think it'll be a better experience.
So you'll have a way to do your own tech support, I guess, with AI? Is that? And maybe you could sell that back to the inverter manufacturer?
I don't think
it's more of a partnership. But yes, we're already doing that.
We're obviously constantly making it better and better in terms of the information,
the capabilities of our AI.
Endurance is our platform that we created, but we already have the capability today.
So besides needing technicians out there to do your commissioning and maintenance, O&M and all that, what other jobs are you looking for? These might be the new jobs of the future too, I imagine. How do you coordinate and make all this AI work with what you're doing? There needs to be some human in there probably. You don't just go to Chat GPT or something and go like, make me this kind of business or anything like that. And you were saying too a little bit about leisure time. And I was thinking like probably guys like you and I for our leisure time are going to be out there trying to start a business or do something entrepreneurial.
Yeah, I do think that companies are going to have fewer and fewer people per company.
It doesn't mean there won't be more companies, right? So
It probably is, at least for a while. For instance, new companies like Otovo, they've had
an advantage.
there's not, entrenched processes, entrenched people, entrenched mindset on thinking. And we have a burning desire to win. And so we've got to go and make these, decisions.
And we don't have the baggage that many other existing companies do. So we're going
to be more fleet-footed. We're going to embrace the technology.
We're going to say instead, no, we can't do that with the technology. We're going to push the envelope with it and make it work better for our customers.
So the answer to the question is that there's not going to be a whole lot of
hiring in other positions outside the service technician.
We have a large group already of experienced people that have worked with each other and built a service company before. We're going to take that experience, and we are taking that experience and build it out, but do so in a much far more efficient way using new technology.
So are a lot of the people that you're working with former Sunova employees?
Yes.
Okay. So you have all of the best parts of Sunova working with you. So that's great. Okay.
It is. I'm sure we'll have some more. So there's other spots, and I'd hope to have it everybody back on the technician side and the service side that we had eventually. And yeah, I know that's not realistic, but it's something that we'd like to welcome them home.
When we were just talking about, more leisure time for the drivers and things like that. And one of the things that I was thinking is like, you go back in history, there was these big companies and people would work for this one company for their whole life, like General Electric or something like that. And then people are getting more and more careers throughout their life. And with more leisure time, I don't think people really just want to do nothing, like to not accomplish things and make the world a better place. They're not going to have satisfaction. So I think that maybe we are getting more entrepreneurial in society. You even look at the people doing the driving with their apps. That's an entrepreneurial thing. They can work for Uber, they can work for Lyft, they can work for DoorDash, they can work for all of these different companies, and they'll have more of an entrepreneurial spirit, being able to do write-off expenses, and maybe they will go out there and not have to work so hard, but also maybe do something they want to do, And
Exactly.
Maybe some of those people will be O&M technicians. And, I'm not sure if you have them all employees, or sometimes in some places you might have them as independent contractors, just like an Uber driver. Yeah, but not like a Waymo driver.
Yeah.
Those Waymo drivers, they have no rights. Not yet. We're not giving the AI people any rights like that. So that's pretty neat what you're doing. And I've really enjoyed talking with you. And are there other things that you want to talk about or cover, or any famous last words?
No, I appreciate you having me on, and we're looking forward to having Tovo go out there and deliver the best service for power assets for homeowners in the United States and in Europe. And we're excited about being the quickest and most reliable service out there. So give us a shot.
Well, thank you so much, John Berger. And also, John, if you need to do any kind of training for your people, I'm the one that gets people NABCEP certified, and I can do all kinds of training like I did for you before at Sunova. I came out there, I did some PV associate qualifications for some classes and some PV technical sales, and I can do PV commissioning and maintenance specialist certification training. So thanks a lot for talking to me and being on the podcast. It was an honor to have you on. You're a solar celebrity. Everybody knows who you are. So thanks very much. And thanks everyone for listening to Shawn White's Solar and Energy Storage Podcast. Thanks a lot, John. Woo!